and thank you for being here. This is indeed a momentous occasion for the people of Darfur, first and foremost, and Nimat will speak to that, and from that perspective. Certainly, it's a momentous day for the International Criminal Court, and more broadly, the cause of justice and ending impunity for the most serious crimes under law. The mass murder of civilians, the use of rape as a weapon of intimidation or war, the forcible displacement of whole populations on the basis of their ethnicity. So this is a significant, momentous day, and I would say the decision of the judges of the ICC that we heard this morning is really of seismic proportions. Let me say a word or two about the significance of the arrest warrant that the judges issued. With this warrant, the International Criminal Court has essentially put out a wanted poster for President Omar Al-Bashir of Sudan and has linked him on the basis of the evidence provided by the prosecutor of the court to widespread and systematic crimes committed against the people of Darfur. It will, I believe, stigmatize and mark Omar Al-Bashir as an individual accused of some of the most horrific crimes that can be committed. I enumerated them a moment ago, but just formally: murder, extermination, forcible transfer, torture, and rape. Those are the 5 counts of crimes against humanity contained in Article 7 of the Rome Statute of the ICC. The judges also found reasonable basis to believe Omar Al-Bashir was implicated in 2 counts of war crimes, intentionally directing attacks against civilian population and pillage. I believe this arrest warrant will mark Omar Al-Bashir as an accused war criminal, an individual who needs to answer before this court in a fair trial, in a trial in which he enjoys all the benefits of a vigorous and effective legal defense to the charges alleged. But it will mark him as a man who has to answer for these serious charges, and I think stigmatize him on that basis. And I emphasize this point because the question undoubtedly arises: when will he be arrested, or what is the significance of this warrant if you cannot say when Omar Al-Bashir will be arrested and surrendered for fair trial to the International Criminal Court? I would refer you to the experience of Slobodan Milosevic, of Radovan Karadzic, of former Liberian President Charles Taylor, all individuals charged by an international court for these kinds of grave crimes, who were marginalized and whose grip on abusive exercise of power was weakened by virtue of these criminal charges. And I'm not clairvoyant. I can't predict how this will or may unfold regarding Omar Al-Bashir, but I think the president of Sudan and his government knows today that the world looks a great deal different than it did yesterday in terms of his legitimacy and its own legitimacy. Now, let me say a word about what we all recognize is the Achilles heel of these international courts and tribunals, and that is its or their ability to arrest those that the judges charge. The International Criminal Court, of course, has no police force of its own to go out and execute its judicial orders, and is dependent on the government of Sudan to carry out this arrest warrant, as the judges have indicated. And I want to underscore for you that many of us were in this building on March 31st, 2005, when the Security Council, right across the hall, in Resolution 1593, obligated the Sudanese authorities to cooperate with this court, including the arrest and surrender of Omar Al-Bashir. And we, Human Rights Watch, and I'm sure it's true of all the members of the Coalition for the International Criminal Court, look to the Security Council that mandated the ICC to investigate and prosecute these crimes, to see that this arrest warrant, initiated, triggered by the Security Council, is in fact complied with by the authorities in Khartoum. And we look to those members of the Council that have particular ties with Khartoum, and I mean the People's Republic of China and Libya, to convey to Khartoum the legally binding obligation that the authorities there have to cooperate. We think it's also important that nothing can be done to upset Khartoum's other legally binding obligations, including deploying the UNAMID peacekeeping force, including protecting and safeguarding humanitarian aid workers who feed and care for millions of Darfuris living in internally displaced person camp in Darfur, and civilians at risk in Darfur. It is the Security Council's obligation to convey to Khartoum that it must adhere to this warrant, and that it cannot use this warrant in any way, shape, or form as a pretext to evade its other binding obligations. Lastly, I want to say that it is a misnomer or a mischaracterization to say that the warrant today issued by the court somehow interferes with the peace process in Darfur. That is a false opposition and a false statement of the facts. First and foremost, unfortunately, there is no peace process in Darfur, and that's because of the lack of political will on the side of all parties in that conflict to bring it to an end. This warrant in no way, shape, or form interferes with that process, which has been stalled for reasons having nothing to do with the International Criminal Court. That's an important fact. And I want to recall to those leaders, and I think it's but a handful, in the African Union, who may claim that this is directed against an African leader unfairly or selectively, the comments made by Desmond Tutu in the New York Times yesterday about the importance of justice being done. And the question for those in the African Union or elsewhere who would oppose this warrant is, where do they stand? Where will they situate themselves? With the victims or on the side of the accused perpetrators?